Go to Skip Fry's.
Conservatives wanted power so much that they walked their biggest fear into the White House. Here's proof that nobody hates freedom more than MAGA. Trump unilaterally decided to make it illegal to burn the American flag, a right guaranteed under the First Amendment and affirmed by the Supreme Court in 1989. Last I checked, presidents can't make laws, but MAGA doesn't care. Trump plans to deploy troops in Democratic-run cities where they aren't welcome to police American citizens. States' rights, anyone? Separation of powers? Don't tread on me? Party of small government? Conservatives used to be against tyranny, but now they cheer as boots tighten around our necks and soldiers with rifles terrorize marginalized communities. Trump's also drastically expanded surveillance, disregarding constitutional due process to target his enemies. He's tapped AI firm Palantir to create the largest centralized database on American citizens and ordered agencies and states to hand over sensitive data to receive federal funding. So-called conservatives who claim to oppose government expansion support it. This is just the tip of the iceberg. He centralized more power in the executive branch than ever, the very thing conservatives warned against. But here's the thing, fascism feels good when it's aimed at your enemies, but it won't always be like that. Eventually the system will be weaponized against everyone. MAGA can't see that they're not taking America back, they're giving it away. Yes, America isn't working for most of us, but instead of addressing the real issues like money and corporations controlling policies, they blame the most vulnerable while Trump gives the wealthy even more power. Conservatives wanted power so much that they walked their big...
That's right. I believe it's been proven multiple times that if there's one thing that Republicans love, it's small government, quote unquote. Welcome to ViperTV Live. Yeah, I said yesterday the Second Amendment was basically for the two-way bros to be like, yeah, tread on everybody but not me. We're going to get right into it because this MAGA Marxism, as I like to call it, this is a real thing now. Did you see that the federal government has decided to take control of Amtrak? Yeah, that's no joke. Actual Amtrak. So the idea of private enterprise is getting less and less as, you know, the government starts to move it further and further and further into socialism, or even a version of communism if we're talking about price controls. But socialism, if he's talking about, you know, getting stock in companies that we sort of, you know, we really frown upon this kind of thing due to the fact that, you know, we are a quote unquote capitalist country. And, you know, I think Jessica Tarlov said it right best right here with this post. It's just a simple tweet, but with Kevin Hassett saying this, take a look. So when CNBC asked, so should we expect the U.S. government to be taking more equity stakes in businesses around the country? He said, yeah, it's possible. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Now, last I checked, if that's socialism and it's going towards the government, so that's national socialism. Yeah, I think we have a problem. Like I said, it's always been, you know, rules for thee, not for me. Sorry about that volume check right there. What I mean by that is, how many times were you called, as a leftist, were you called a fucking socialist? And this says right here, I don't want to hear a single word about Democrats and socialism ever again. Ever. Plain and simple. However, all of these policies are starting to affect regular people in ways that they didn't expect, especially people who were, I guess, considered conservative and voted conservative. Take a look at this gentleman right here. He really, really breaks it down.
I am pissed, and I'm pissed at you because I have emailed you because it's easier for me than to try to talk on the phone without profanity.
I understand, sir.
I would appreciate you taking your father's U.S. Constitution book, read it, study it, make your own lines underneath it, and get Trump out of office.
Now, how many times have you just heard over and over and over, especially by the Republican caucus that carries their little pocket constitutions, that they're just defenders of the Constitution, but yet when the time comes that they actually have to defend it in order to represent their constituents instead of just capitulating to Trump because they're afraid of either being primaried or the cult showing up at their door? Yeah, you need to reread that little book that you've been carrying around because it's more than a fucking prop.
Man is a dictator. He knows nothing about what he talks about. I listened to him for about a half hour today, and I got sick at all the lies he brought up.
You know, speaking of that, actually, funny enough, have you seen that clip that's going around that Joe Rogan, of all people, is starting to figure out that Trump is completely full of shit when it comes to, quote unquote, winning the election? Not this previous one, but, well, actually, there's been documents filed in New York, but we can get into that some other time. But Joe Rogan's being like, yeah, I think he was full of shit. I think he's lying to us. And then Andrew Schultz being like, this isn't what I voted for. It's you know, with Joe Rogan, like, just, he can't believe the mass cruelty that's happening. And it's like, motherfucker, like, you know who you helped, like, platform. Like, now's not the time for regret because the things are happening that you thought would never happen. Like, phase 1 MAGA was, this is never going to happen. Phase 2 MAGA is, this is what people fucking voted for. And the thing that just has my mind just blown right here is now they just openly are just like, yeah, let's just go ahead and get the government involved in everything. You know, remember the party of a small government, like, constantly being like, states' rights. And, like, if they actually had to wear a mask, you know, then it was the end of the fucking world for them. Like, this is the thing, is we expected there to be an honor system when it came to this whole political business. You know, checks, balances, the idea of not just as soon as you get power, just completely eliminate the ideas of the minority party. And the problem was we've been playing too nice. We haven't been fucking bullying. And that's what I'm liking about Newsom. Newsom has gotten so under their skin that they don't realize that there's a mirror being held up to them. There's a great little bit of writing here. It says, your grandmother was wrong, and so was your kindergarten teacher. And it turns out when faced with a bully, ignoring them and taking the high road, it just isn't, it's like, it's not only ineffective, but it's psychologically counterproductive. Newsom figured this out, and while Democrats spent years wringing their hands about norms and dignity and decorum and shit, like, Newsom did something radical. He started fighting fire with fire. He's trolling Trump with memes and calling his officials fascist cucks and posting TikToks that mock, like, the president with Nickelback songs. The pro clutchers are horrified, and the psychologists, well, they're fascinated about this. Research on bullying reveals an uncomfortable truth that contradicts decades of feel-good advice. Studies of children aged 11 through 12 found that those who returned hostility with hostility appeared to be the most mature. Boys who stood up to the bullies were judged more socially competent by their teachers, while girls who fought back were more popular and more admired by their teachers and peers. I learned this in the Navy because when I was in the military, we couldn't throw hands when we got pissed off. We had to use our words. And you learned to talk shit in one way or another because there was people you could fuck with and people you couldn't fuck with, and it was your choice to figure out who you were going to be. This isn't some fringe study. It's part of a growing body of evidence that challenges bullies directly. That's saying, remember the whole like sticks and stones break my bones, words never hurt me, turn my other cheek? No. You see, challenging bullies directly rather than hoping adults will intervene actually works. The kids who fought back directly rather than hoping adults intervene, well, they didn't just stop getting bullied. They thrived socially and emotionally. Like, I always have the philosophy of do no harm, but take no shit. To understand why Newsom's strategy works, you need to decode Trump's psychological arsenal. Trump didn't stumble into power. He weaponized specific cognitive biases. Research shows people intuitively think that if you speak confidently, you know what you're talking about. Trump's language is lower in analytic thinking and higher in confidence than most any previous American president. This is why people who make mediocre art are wildly popular, because they think they're good at it. You can sell a line of bullshit with a bunch of confidence. The facts be damned. But when you can actually sell facts and figures and data with full confidence because you know they're real, I think that's really when messaging actually is, I'd say, more effective. The strategy uses emotionally charged anti-establishment crisis narrative, and that puts his audience in a loss frame with nothing to lose. When people feel everything is at stake, they'll accept more extreme responses. Look how many people are like approving of soldiers on the streets. I never thought how many people would actually want an authoritarian government. Turns out there's more people that actually want that than don't. When it comes to conservative thinking, because, you know, like I said, they would always rally about small government, but when the time comes when it's big government doing exactly what it is that they want, they have no problem with it. There's no, you know, there's no scruples to this. You know, like Trump constantly uses this powerful political tool that involves like identifying outgroups who pose a threat to the in-group, and this causes the in-group members to band more tightly together and become more loyal to their leader. These aren't accidents, they're psychological equivalent of precision weapons. And here's where it gets really interesting. Newsom isn't just standing up to Trump, he's using Trump's exact playbook against him. His TikTok followers jumped from like 500,000 in March to 1.8 million. Why? Because he's speaking the same psychological language that made Trump effective, especially the mockery. When Border Patrol agents showed up at Newsom's redistricting rally, he immediately posted, "Donald Trump has sent armed agents to our rally. We will not be intimidated." That's not defensive politics. That's offensive reframing using Trump's own crisis narrative technique. The psychological term is mirroring. It's adopting your opponent's communication patterns to disrupt their advantage, and bullies rely on power imbalances. When their victims start using their own tactics, it creates cognitive dissonance and levels the playing field. That's the beautiful part. Here's the brilliant psychological hack of all of it, is he's using the same techniques and tactics while maintaining moral superiority. His spokesperson explicitly distinguishes their approach. While the Trump administration uses these tactics to demean and belittle the powerless, Gavin Newsom's using them to stand up to the powerful and call out the authoritarian methods of the current White House occupant, including mocking the whole merch thing. Did you see that he didn't actually sell a Bible, but he put the whole sold out sticker on it? Like, it's brilliant. This is like psychologically crucial. Its research shows that social context determines whether behavior is seen as justified or aggressive. David versus Goliath gets cheered, Goliath versus David gets booed. Newsom has positioned himself as David using Goliath's own weapons. Traditional Democratic messaging fails because it assumes politics is rational. It's not, especially now. Tony Michaels likes to say we're at the corner of WrestleMania in real life, and fuck if it's not true. People rely upon images of reality that are built upon what they see, hear, and read through their networks rather than firsthand experiences. Why do you think the Trump NFTs did so good? Because it painted this superhero image that, you know, people could worship. And that's why the Newsom trolling is doing so good, because it's showing just how absolutely ridiculous it is. He understands it. And when Trump attacks California's fire response, Newsom doesn't release a 12-page white paper on forest management. He posts a video calling Trump a weak little man, and it goes viral. Newsom's aggressive pushback feels more authentic than measured political responses. People trust fighters more than diplomats when they feel under attack. This strategy isn't without dangers. Critics note it's difficult to discern the differences between Trump's demands on states and Newsom's on cities and counties. There's a risk of normalizing toxic political behavior. But if that's what's going to take, that's what it's going to take. You know, you got to hit the bully back. But here's the epistemological problem. If normal political behavior is structurally inadequate for dealing with authoritarian threats, then what's the choice? It isn't between dignity and tactics, but between effective resistance and elegant defeat. From a purely psychological perspective, Newsom is getting more than his critics realize. Research on anti-bullying intervention shows that having social reference deliver anti-conflict messages is more effective than traditional top-down approaches. Newsom isn't just trolling for attention. He's using scientifically validated and psychological principles to challenge authoritarian behavior. He's discovered that sometimes the most effective way to protect democratic norms isn't to model them perfectly, but to prevent their opponents from trampling them completely. Your grandmother meant well, but when dealing with bullies, psychology beats politeness every single time. With that being said, that gentleman we were just talking about that was giving his response to this town hall, I'm sure that not only has he been hit in the pocket by these ridiculous tariffs and just prices increasing in general, but also being lied to at the same time. I really like the rest of this guy's response. Check it out.
Start taxing corporations and the wealthy, like we've been telling you. Do you think we're idiots? Do you think we don't pay taxes? Do you think that we don't have to make budgets? You talk about half-truths when I listen to you. You know nothing about taking care of children because you've always had a really good-paying job. You know nothing about...
And that's 100% true. You know, the people who are responsible for this economic downturn have never once missed a meal. They have no idea what it's like to have to worry about if the power is going to be on next month. And honestly, the cruelty is the point of this administration. This administration is getting to the point now where if you call out their lies, they can punish you for calling out their lies. And that's why, you know, the Putin playbook is working so well. Because go back to Solzhenitsyn, they lie. We know they're lying. They know we know they're lying, but still they lie.
About what a working class citizen does. Come down here. Come down here and start trying to pay your medical insurance. Come down here and walk into Costco to try to feed your family, to feed your kid that's moved out, to feed your great-grandchildren. I had a very good job in California, and I'm able to feed my family, and it goes all the way to great-grandchildren. You're not helping me. Believe me, you're not helping me. You need to take your head out of Trump's ass and start doing your representation of us.
That's right, damn it. It's their job to represent us. We don't work for them. They work for us. And they need to remember that shit. Because, man, people they are done putting up with it. Especially with the fact that we see, for lack of better words, Trump rotting in the White House. Like, if Biden hand was rotting on live television, that shit would be covered 24/7, plain and simple. The actual bias of the news is it's so complicit in why we have fascism. What do I mean by that? I mean, Jake fucking Tapper. Think about that. Jake fucking Tapper. He wrote an entire book on Biden's health, which, fine with me. Biden's health wasn't all that great. But I want to see turnabout being, fair play, because once more, if the previous president was showing necrotic rot nearly on top of his hands, I'm pretty sure that the news would be covering that at least a little bit. What do you think? You're watching ViperTV. Stick around.
Oops, Donald. You thought you sent J.D. Vance to talk to Rupert Murdoch about stopping the Epstein story. Well, that didn't work. But there's something you should worry about, Donald. Something you should think about. What if J.D. Vance cuts a deal with Rupert? Maybe J.D. Vance and Rupert figured out the succession. Who comes after you? They don't want to wait. Maybe they talked about when to start the 25th Amendment process to take you out. You should have sent Don Jr. or someone else that you could trust. Because you know J.D. Vance will tell anybody whatever it takes to get what he wants. And Rupert, he won't just listen to J.D. He'll take action. And if J.D. and Rupert get their way, you'll lose, Donald. You'll lose everything.
Where's the lie? Because Peter Thiel, Curtis Yarvin, they all have J.D. Vance lined up to be the little golden boy when that happens. And we know just how fast he'll fucking flip when it comes to, any sort of actual integrity. Because remember the whole I'm a never Trump guy and the whole Trump is America's next Hitler. Well, at least he was right about that. I'll tell you what, though. Let's go ahead and dive into something that I found. And man, especially with the current political climate that we have going on, with the current government takeover of the private sector, and with the militarization of the police, sort of creating a police state, if you will. I mean, well, it only reminds me of one particular thing. Let's see what Troy Bond has to say about this.
Certain point of view. A certain point of view?
Democracy, that's a word that just, that's one of those words you hear more and more every day. The kids are saying it, the adults are saying it, the people who don't even really know what it means are declaring it. It's that thing we all love.
I love democracy.
And nowhere is democracy's fragile nature more entertainingly illustrated than in Star Wars, right? It's a space opera with lightsabers and wizards with daddy issues, sure, but the real villain in Star Wars is
The next time you think of Star Wars, think of it with space wizards with daddy issues.
parliamentary procedure.
Had the Senate bogged down in procedures.
I was not elected to watch my people die while you discuss this invasion in a committee.
When I was a kid, I only watched it for the force. Now, as an adult, I'm watching The Phantom Menace as a documentary. If you've been online this week, you've seen the opening crawl for a reason. And it's because shit's in shambles. We are in Phantom Menace mode right now. Democracy, for those who don't know, maybe you're watching in a place, in a country where there's not a democracy, like America. A democracy is a system of government which people exercise it through elected representatives or themselves. Right? Democracies are characterized by free and fair elections, the rule of law, separation of powers, the protection of individual rights and freedoms, and in theory should function as a insurance that the government will reflect the will of the people and preventing concentration from one single ruler or a governing body having all the power. In Star Wars,
which, funny enough, did you see that Stephen Miller is saying that the Democrat Party is starting to be classified as an extremist organization? Yeah, go ahead and look it up. One party rule. What's that? Sounds a lot like fascism. But no, MAGA said that would never happen. They also said they would never build concentration camps either.
The Galactic Republic is the most dysfunctional Senate since our own. Basically, it serves as a representation of democracy operating through elected senators, which different representatives from different planets debate and they create legislation. But as we see in the prequel trilogy, the Republic's democracy is deeply flawed. It's vulnerable to an authoritarian takeover. Star Wars has always been a saga deeply rooted in political allegory. George Lucas drew inspiration from historical events and the fall of democracies to construct the rise and fall of the galactic.
Which, funny enough, when George Lucas did the original Star Wars, he based it on the United States versus the Viet Cong, the Empire versus the the Rebellion. Funny enough, like people that always say Star Wars isn't political, it's got the word war in it.
Galactic Republic and the prequels. The prequel trilogy explores how stable democracies can be manipulated into an authoritarian regime, right? Through manufactured crises, economic manipulation, the erosion of civil liberties.
I always think of that failed assassination of Palpatine as the ketchup on the ear incident. You know which one I'm talking about.
The galaxy in Star Wars undergoes a profound transformation between the prequel trilogy, right, which is The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith, and the original trilogy, which is A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Prequels go pretty deep into politics, and that bored a lot of people when it first came out. But it's showing us not just how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader. The B plot is the declining republic on the brink of collapse, where the original trilogy already presents you with that oppressive galactic empire regime facing a rebellion. Like, looking at these differences help illuminate the overarching themes of the saga, which is democracy's fragility, its dangers of unchecked power, and the fight for freedom. That's what Star Wars is all about. The Star Wars prequel trilogy serves as a cautionary tale about democracy's collapse and ending with authoritarian rule. The Phantom Menace starts with a trade dispute where Revenge of the Sith ends with the Republic just transforming into a galactic empire dictatorship. These
Funny how the trade dispute was one of the things that kicked off the fall of the democracy, because you can create the tariff war and then the corruption goes to the heads of every single, member of the trade system in Star Wars, because they were all receiving the benefits, if you will, which they did long up until the time came that, all of them got turned on. One of my favorite things from Star Wars that I always tell people that is so reminiscent of dealing with fascism is in the Cloud City with Lando Calrissian, and when Darth Vader says that he's going to take Han Solo with him, and then He's going to keep troops stationed on Cloud City. And Lando says that wasn't part of the deal. And Vader says, pray I don't alter the deal any further. And that's a textbook example of what happens when you capitulate to fascists.
Parallel modern political times, all right? Particularly Trump's trade war, his use of propaganda, and erosion of democratic norms. Listen, I'm not going to preach to you this entire time, but I am going to just show you parallels. And I hope that if you think differently than I do politically, you can at least see some of these parallels. It used to be science fiction to think this, but now it's reality. And the prequels show us how one man can destabilize the entire republic, a republic upheld by democracy, and how it can erode from within, and how its citizens prioritize power over principles. It's a warning that democracy is not some self-sustaining car. It requires vigilance, accountability, commitment to its core values, whatever those are, to prevent that galactic empire. The Phantom Menace, the Senate, is paralyzed by bureaucracy, right? It fails to act decisively, allowing Palpatine to rise in influence, right? Because at the start of Phantom Menace, we're introduced to the Galactic Republic, which is a massive interplanetary government where elected officials debate important issues and vote policies, and E.T. is also there for some reason. And it's all going great. And by great, you mean incomprehensibly and completely paralyzed by bureaucracy. For example, the Republic's response to the...
When he just said that, paralyzed by bureaucracy, I instantly thought of how the Democrats would do shit like listen to the Senate parliamentarian and be like, well, we can't do this. Like, they look for any fucking excuse to say that they couldn't do it. Whereas, like, the Republicans, one thing you have to give them is they say, no, fuck the parliamentarian and fuck the rules, fuck the procedures. Like, do you remember what happened with, Merrick Garland getting his seat during the Obama administration and what McConnell did? And then as soon as they had the chance to confirm Amy Coney Barrett, bam, just that fucking fast. Like I said, that's one thing you have to give it to fascists. They're like, oh, we realize that this all depends on decorum. Yeah, and we don't have any, so fuck you.
Trade Federation blockading Naboo, a literal act of terror, was to, and I quote, send a committee to discuss it. That's not how a government works. That's how a homeowners association with the...
Reminds me of Life of Brian, the People's Front of Judea. Was just, this calls for immediate discussion.
Of grandeur works, okay? And that's why the prequels are a story of a republic in decline. And it used to be the beacon of democracy, and now it's largely controlled by bureaucrats, corporations, and the Trade Federation. And now they've openly defied the Senate and have blockaded Naboo. This is characterized by political maneuvering, as Chancellor Valorum is struggling to sort of maintain control between the two powers, allowing ambitious figures. Enter Senator Palpatine, who is a soft-spoken man who looks like your grandfather right before he's about to say something racist that's going to ruin Thanksgiving. At the same time, he's also training to be a Dark Lord of the Sith, so like many politicians, he's deeply closeted, which makes Amidala forced into a position of calling for a vote of no confidence in the current chancellor, paving the way for Palpatine's rise, which was his plan the whole time. There's a real-world parallel in the Emperor Magatine's trade war with China. Much like the Federation's blockade, Emperor Magatine's aggressive tariffs and sanctions, they're framed as an effort to protect workers, but really they're harming farmers, workers. It's creating economic instability. Manufacturers and consumers are both fucked. Rather than resolving the existing issues, the trade war exacerbates them, allowing Emperor Magatine to position himself as a nationalist strongman fighting against foreign influence. Similarly, the Trade Federation's blockade allowed Palpatine to manipulate the public perception of himself, to portray himself as the only person capable of resolving this crisis. So, I mean, what was the warning of the Phantom Menace? And the answer is the Menace himself, Palpatine, right? Darth Sidious. Palpatine was his slave name. You know, the fall of democracy doesn't happen overnight. No. It is by somebody who plays the long game. He orchestrates a trade blockade. Then he manipulates Queen Amidala into calling for a vote of no confidence against
One thing that you have to say, though, for Shiv Palpatine is he didn't have the Heritage Foundation behind him backing him up, but I'm sure there was some semblance of manufacturing titans who contributed money to because obviously, you know, elections take money, campaigns take money. So I'm sure we dealt with the same thing. The same people that backed, you know, like Oswald Mosley in Britain.
Chancellor Valorum, a sitting chancellor. It's essentially a Star Wars version of gerrymandering, only with a few more lightsabers and fewer Supreme Court justices pretending that their hands are tied, or that they've tied someone's hands behind their back. Jar Jar is MAGA. Okay, he's clueless, he's hated by most people, and he kisses up to a leader who despises him. But the Jedi are...
Oh my God, was that an accurate fucking statement? Because think about it. It was Jar Jar who ended up giving the vote of confidence to Palpatine to give him supreme powers, supreme emergency powers.
Are Democrats. They're ineffective tools. They are being manipulated by a system that is militarizing, that's pushing them into militarization.
Holy shit, was Chuck Schumer on the Jedi Council? If they're just, I don't know, so bogged down with procedure that they couldn't do anything and be completely ineffective? Is that the case? I never would have thought of Chuck Schumer as a Jedi, but here we are.
And they dropped the ball on an ensuing uprising. At least when Amidala's ship was being attacked by the Trade Federation blockade, they had R2-D2 to fix it. All we have is Chuck Schumer on the wing yelling that the Ninth Circuit Court ruled the blockade to be unconstitutional. You know, Trump was basically Palpatine and Valorum was Biden, sitting duck, who Palpatine and Trump Palpatine points out Valorum's corruption in order to hide his own, just like Trump did. Now, let's get to Attack of the Clones. Because by this point, the Republic is in absolute shambles. There's a full-blown separatist movement, wars looming, and the Senate, like a distracted dad at a Little League game, is barely paying attention. Enter Palpatine again, who convinces the Senate to give him emergency powers to deal with this crisis. If history has taught us anything, it's that emergency powers are about as temporary as crabs, right? Like,
Yeah, do you remember the whole, like, I'm going to be a dictator, but only on day one? Well, it turns out that day one never ends, does it? Especially when Congress literally made rules so that Trump can't be held to account because essentially the one day never ends. Trust me, look it up if you think I'm wild now.
They gonna go away, but like it's gonna be a minute, brother. Not that I would know. But Palpatine then introduces the Clone Army, which is a move that the Jedi should have clearly been suspicious of, but of course they're wise warrior Jedi who can sense the Force, but not basic deception. Just, you know, their policy there is, hey, roll with it. Count Dooku, who was a former Jedi himself, created this crisis to grant Palpatine emergency powers because he's a double agent. This is the beginning of the militarization of the Republic into an empire. The Jedi, who were peacekeepers, are now generals, compromising their moral standards, making them a tool in the Republic's downfall. Palpatine's rise is not unlike ones like Nixon or George Bush, U.S. presidents who embroiled themselves in controversy over how expanded executive powers, much like Palpatine's consolidation of control of the Republic, lead to what they lead to, like Nixon and Watergate. His abuse of executive actions led to his downfall, and Palpatine's orchestration of the crisis of the war justified his takeover. Now, George Bush, in this conversation, is very interesting because during when this movie came out, this was during the war on terror, and we saw the passing of the Patriot Act and the war in Iraq, and the Bush administration capitalized on fear, much like Palpatine did, to increase surveillance and justify military actions. Palpatine uses fear of the separatist movement to push the Senate toward to push them toward the creation of a clone army. And that is how a democracy starts sliding into a dictatorship. George Lucas.
The clone army in our modern case is ICE. It's the paramilitary force that is there to protect the dictator in power.
Lucas was never subtle about this with these parallels. It's no coincidence that Attack of the Clones came out at the same time the world was grappling with these issues and was drawing from real history to show how fragile democracies become when fear is used as manipulation. Just like Bush, just like Nixon, Palpatine uses external threats, real or imagined, to convince the public that the only way to stay safe is to give up just a little more freedom. Now let's talk proxy wars for a second, right? In Star Wars, the galactic...
Exactly what he just said. Like I said, I saw news interviews with people who saw the National Guard marching around D.C. being like, oh, I feel safe. I feel safer than I never felt before. And it's those people who this is meant to work on. This is the bait and switch.
Civil War is a lot like the Cold War. The Rebel Alliance and the Empire are fighting each other the same way the U.S. and the Soviet Union did, through intermediaries, until they start blowing shit up, which we never did in the Cold War. Tear down this wall, Mr. Gorbachev. The Clone Wars are a perfect example of a proxy war. Palpatine, as Chancellor, manipulated both sides to weaken the Jedi and to consolidate his own power. The war is, he's like that quote from Mac, It's Always Sunny. When you play both sides, you never lose. The war is framed as noble on the surface, but truthfully it's part of the grand plan to create chaos and solidify control. This isn't just science fiction, it's a reflection of how the real world works. You know, world superpowers use smaller nations as battlegrounds for ideologies. George Lucas shows us through Palpatine how proxy wars can be used to manipulate a democracy from the inside.
Sort of like what we was talking about yesterday on the Sneaky Fucking Russians episode. They're putting all of this propaganda out that's anti-Ukraine just to boost Russia's propaganda, which is pro-white, straight, Christian. And because the rubes are seeing what they want to see, they're not going to question it, but they will regurgitate it.
And the Jedi have a meeting with him in Attack of the Clones. It's a subtle moment, but it's pretty significant that it foreshadows the fall of the Jedi and the rise of the Empire. The scene has underlying tensions between the Jedi and the political leadership of the Republic because it serves as a critical and it serves as this critical moment between Palpatine's long-term manipulation of the Jedi and the Senate. At this point in Attack of the Clones, just to give you some context, they're at the brink of war. And Count Dooku and the Separatists are threatening to break away from the Republic, and the fears are that the Republic's military is insufficient to counter this threat. Palpatine convenes this meeting with the Jedi to discuss rising tensions and potential for open conflict, right? And he appears to be concerned about the galactic security. This moment is carefully orchestrated by him because this is what he wants to further his own agenda. And it's how he accumulates power to push the Republic into a total empire. one of the key dynamics at play in this meeting is the growing disconnect between the Jedi and the Senate. The Jedi, who traditionally act as peacekeepers and mediators, are increasingly being drawn into conflicts. Mace Windu, Yoda, other members of the Jedi Council show signs of their unease of their shift in role, essentially. They can sense the dark side is clouding their ability to foresee events, and they recognize that the Republic is moving down a dangerous path by focusing on military solutions to political problems. Yoda, in particular, is cautious, expressing his concern about the government's instability.
I think right there is a great way to put it. Military solutions to political problems. When that starts to be an option on the table, that's when you really have problems, because the military is made, as a veteran, is made to follow the chain of command. We are meant to follow from the commander-in-chief down. Now, it's the jobs of the lower ranking members underneath the commander-in-chief to establish what are legal and lawful and unlawful orders. But when those people have been replaced by sycophants, then what is an unlawful order at that point?
In the galaxy, worrying about the dark side's amplified, worrying about the dark side being amplified, the fact that the Jedi, their ability to use the Force has been diminished. This is signaling that something deeper is at play here, but they can't pinpoint the source of the disturbance, which we, as the audience, know is Palpatine. And that's where his manipulation is important to talk about, because he, of course, knows exactly what he's doing. He has skillfully masked his intentions by playing the role of a concerned, reluctant leader.
That reminds me of exactly of when confronted about Project 2025. It was pure, I don't know, I've never heard of it. It's something I'd never do. And then the moment that the election's over, not only is Russ Vaught, R-O-M-B, but also Matt Walsh and Benny Johnson are like, yeah, Project 2025 is pretty much the plan the whole time. And they delighted in the fact that they lied to everybody and got away with it.
In this scene, Palpatine is deliberately pushing the Jedi and the Senate toward granting him some more power so he could create a clone army, which will eventually help him take out the Jedi. This is one of those early steps in Palpatine's larger plan, who has already been in power longer than he should have at this point. He feigns helplessness in the face of the separatist threat, right? Like, he's suggesting that he should decide on how.
In case you haven't noticed, victim mentality is always essential to fascism, especially the idea of you are this strong alpha, but also, you're the victim of your enemies, but yet at the same time, your enemies are extremely weak and feeble, but they're ridiculously strong. You can see that the idea is just to literally move whatever goalposts that it takes in order to frame that you're the victim of something.
How best to respond, knowing that he's going to do the extreme measure response, including the authorization of emergency powers through the creation of an army. Creating the illusion of external threats, Palpatine can manipulate the Senate into giving him the power he needs to dismantle the Republic from the within, and that's where the Jedi's blind spot sort of comes into play. Windu and Yoda are weary of Palpatine's expanding influence, but they can't see the full extent of his manipulation. He might just be another greedy politician, and it's partly because their vision is clouded. It's also because the Jedi have become too intertwined with the Republic's political system, when that's, it's separation of church and state. They're no longer operate as independent agents of peace, but they're servants of the political machinery of the Senate. This entanglement with the Republic blinds the Jedi. The reality is that Palpatine uses the very system that they're sworn to protect to dismantle the Republic. In trying to preserve the status quo, they fail to realize the Republic is being corrupted from within. This scene.
Are they going to start writing some strongly worded letters? Because the parallels, yeah, that's right, gang. The parallels only a razor's width away.
is a microcosm of the larger theme of the prequel trilogy, which is the Jedi's inability to act in a current political landscape that is changing, and that leads to their downfall and an empire for everybody. And to me, this is where Star Wars really shines. As an adult, how I can appreciate it. It's a lesson. It's meant to educate, especially young people, how democracies crumble. George Lucas uses these tools to teach us about the dangers of unchecked power. And that's where we get to the tragedy of Jar Jar Binks.
Oh,
you ever
boy.
hear the tragedy of Jar Jar the Binks? Jar Jar is democracy's dumbest downfall. And here's where you're about to get truly ridiculous. Do you know who hands Palpatine the emergency powers, the keys to how...
Ooh, I mentioned this earlier.
Keys to everything. Yeah, it's Jar Jar Binks, the Gungan whose main political qualification is kinda being friends with Queen Amidala. He's personally responsible for the rise of the Empire, which means that, in Star Wars logic, the entire collapse of the democracy is basically caused by an idiot who was
I really wonder if it was because egg prices were too high. Do you think that's why? I'm curious if that's why Jar Jar decided to hand that power to Palpatine, because egg prices were too high, or because there were people eating the cats and dogs in the Springfield. I wonder if that's why.
Actually no different than any other politician. Now, I know you're thinking that's ridiculous. No real government would ever let unqualified, buffoonish figure gain immense power through sheer luck and populist manipulation. Yeah. Sit down.
But
sit
enough
down.
about
Sit
Tommy
the fuck down
Tuberville
for a second, okay? Attack of the Clones, Jar Jar is unwittingly a pivotal role in the creation of the Clone Army, and by extension, the rise of the Galactic Empire. Right, his well-intentioned nature and actions are manipulated by Palpatine.
It's mom and pop MAGA right there. All they wanted was lower prices, but they got fascism. Now there is several of them that wanted lower prices and anybody that didn't look like them to get sent to concentration camps. But then there's people that just literally wanted lower prices and bought a line of bullshit from a con man.
Making him one of the most tragic characters in the saga, in my opinion. He is well-meaning, but politically, I'm not sure how he got the job. He was sort of thrust into this situation that was far beyond his understanding, and after Padme leaves Coruscant to attempt to hide from the assassination attempt, she appoints Jar Jar as her representative in the Senate. This move, which was motivated in her trust by him, ultimately ends up being a huge fuck-up and error, and opens the door for Palpatine to explore Jar Jar's lack of political savvy, if that's what you want to call it. I'm a Jar Jar lover. I ain't gonna hate on him too much. Because when Supreme Chancellor Palpatine is presented with the problem of the separatist movement, he keeps telling everyone he needs emergency powers, but there's resistance to that because the Senate doesn't want to approve the creation of clones before the separatists attack. Palpatine knows Jar Jar's simplistic view of the galaxy and counts on him to take the bait. Jar Jar, believing he is acting in the best interest of the Republic, the guy who put his hand inside of a car motor.
He did do that.
He is thinking this is the path Padme would have followed, the thing that she's been fighting against for 18 months. This is exactly what she would do. She would support this, hell yeah, and give Palpatine these emergency powers. And boom, there we have a clone army. This act looks like it's...
See, the thing about Palpatine was at least, he presented himself as, like a kind, altruistic, wise grandfatherly type. This regime, they didn't hide anything. They were as rotten as they possibly could be on the fucking campaign trail. And there were people holding giant mass deportation now signs. There's... The parallels are there, but yet at the same time, this was our situation was far more obvious.
Protecting the Republic, but eventually it's going to be used for Palpatine's takeover as his transition into Emperor. The clone army that Jar Jar helped authorize becomes this tool which Palpatine uses to later control and execute Order 66, exterminating the Jedi, which would have been his extreme resistance to his empire. And he
I believe that Order 66 is the equivalent of not just Project 2025, but also the culmination of everything that's happening right now, where not only ICE is pretty much handed carte blanche authority, but also that there's quick response teams that are also being added to the National Guard. Just more paramilitary.
Viewed as this comedic relief character because he is, his actions are of enormous consequence. Jar Jar's vulnerability and his desire to please people around him, coupled with his inability to see machinations at play, make him easy to be a Palpatine pawn. He is a character who's often ridiculed for his clumsiness, his buffoonery. He is directly responsible for one of the most significant events in galactic history. And it's a cautionary tale about the dangers of ignorance in politics. He's an unwitting accomplice in Palpatine's rise to power, and by extension, the downfall of the Jedi and the birth of the Empire and the death of a democracy. This also shows you how great of a manipulator Palpatine is. He doesn't rely solely on political allies or the dark side to achieve his goals. He preys on well-meaning but gullible people whose good intentions can be twisted to serve his own ends. In this case,
I want you to think about what he just said for 2 seconds, because if that didn't sum it all up, I just don't know what did. Feel free to rewind it if you need to.
Becomes the perfect symbol on how a republic's ideals are subverted from within, using the trust and loyalty of its citizens. The prequel trilogy represents a compelling narrative to the fall of democracy and the role of ambitious people and how they shape history. You know, it's a trilogy that explores how democratic institutions can be manipulated and weaponized. You know, drawing parallels to modern times, Trump's political career mirrors that of Palpatine, who is a figure that exploits fear, division, and institutional weaknesses in order to consolidate power. Elon Musk resembles Anakin Skywalker in Revenge of the Sith, a brilliant, ambitious figure whose desire for control and innovation led him toward an increasingly Arthurian tendency type of dude. And you look at these figures alongside Star Wars to better understand how power, persuasion, and populism shape the political landscape and technology landscape. Trade wars and economic disruptions have always been political tools, right? Like it's they create hardship for industries. And
I mean, Pinochet did exactly the same thing. A lot of people like to draw the parallels of today to Hitler and Mussolini, and yeah, the parallels are there certainly. But if you really want to see serious parallels, study the Pinochet regime.
Order to and consumers in order to justify stronger executive control. That's where you got to look at guys like Elon Musk as Anakin Skywalker, the promise and peril of a visionary. Anakin's fall into from hero to villain in Revenge of the Sith is one of those tragic arcs in Star Wars, because it begins as this prodigious talent is there, told he's going to bring balance, but he's completely gradually.
Well, with Elon Musk is he tried to be friends with the leftists. Do you remember? Like him, like throwing out his heart, and like before he gave his heart out the other way, that he claims that he did, that we all saw. But yeah, for some reason still got gaslit, saying that he didn't do a quote unquote Roman salute. But it seemed like the moment that he got his breakup, the breakup happened to him, and then his trans daughter despised him and pretty much said that he was trying to be the villain from Ready Player One. That's when he went full quote unquote dark MAGA. By the way, there's a great term floating around right now called dark woke, which is what Gavin Newsom is doing with the whole trolling, but yet doing it from a morally superior standpoint. Dark woke. Amazing.
Consumed by his own fears and his own ego and his thirst for control. His transformation into Darth Vader is not an overnight shift, but it's a slow descent that's fueled into a belief that he can reshape the galaxy. Musk, one of the most influential figures in the modern era, follows the similar trajectory. Like Anakin, he started as a young balding guy who pushed boundaries with the Force. His technology and innovation, his work with Tesla and Neuralink and all these things positioned him in a
Oh my God, speaking of Neuralink, my entire childhood that was spent in white Christian nationalism, I was constantly had the fear of everything put into me about the whole quote unquote mark of the beast thing. They'd watch movies like Thief in the Night and all that other 80s pro-religious propaganda that was scared of people like Ozzy. Were they just scared of the lyrics like me looking at you, looking at me? But the thing is that because it became such a part of the zeitgeist that it really feels like so much of this, we're just reliving it again. It's the fourth turning. It really is. But yeah, exactly what he said right here. I'm going to rewind this just for a second.
A pedestal like Anakin, he started as a young balding guy who pushed boundaries with the Force. His technology and innovation, his work with Tesla and Neuralink and all these things positioned him in a
But yeah, going back to the Neuralink thing, how many times did you hear about the quote-unquote mark of the beast? And now, when something that can legitimately be called that, the Neuralink, man, how many quote-unquote Christians are lined up ready to take it just because they're Elon Musk fans? There are no principles to today's conservatives. There just aren't. I'm trying to find any kind of consistency that doesn't involve a moved goalpost.
A pedestal of a hero, much like Anakin on the pedestal of a Jedi Knight and war hero. But Musk's desire for control, his disregard for democratic principles, and his combative relationship with critics mirror Anakin's fall into authoritarianism. Anakin's greatest fear is losing the one that he loves, which is Padme. Palpatine exploits this, convincing him that embracing the dark side may prevent her death, the same way Musk framed himself as a protector of free speech and innovation, arguing that drastic measures have to be taken.
Anytime someone's all bragging about they need to be protecting free speech, 9 times out of 10, it means that they just want to be able to say bigoted shit and not have any kind of pushback. I hate to say that, but once more, we use the parallels of history. Free speech is always used as that little crowbar to go ahead and start making fascist points seem like they're legitimate and that you should actually give them some time of day. And that's a huge problem with shit like Jubilee, because they'll platform people like that. Sure, they can get pushback, but there's people that are getting exposed to that kind of ideology being put in a way that seems like that it's a legitimate counterpoint and that we should listen to instead of just immediately dismiss it.
In order to restore free speech, right? Leading him to purchase Twitter, which was justified as a move to save free speech, when in reality it was tied to eradicate governance, mass layoffs, a growing amount of intolerance and misinformation, and the same way how Anakin meant to save democracy, he destroyed it. And turning against institutions is something Anakin and Elon have in common. Elonikin, I'll call him.
Elonikin,
Anakin's
lovely.
Transformation into Darth Vader when he marches into the Jedi Temple, slaughtering those he once called friends. Musk, too, has also turned against the very institutions that have supported him. You know, after claiming immense government subsidies for Tesla and SpaceX, what'd he do? Chainsaw bureaucracy. He created Doge and got rid of a hell of a lot of those federal bodies. His increasing disdain for regulatory insight and, I don't know.
Now, mind you, those administrative roles, I'm saying roles because he wasn't just giving one, he was given multiple of them. Those administrative roles also involved all of our social security and personal data being grabbed by somebody like Big Balls just so Peter Thiel could get it for Palantir. Don't forget about that. That's don't let that little detail go unnoticed.
Workers' rights reflect Anakin's growth.
Yeah, it was uploaded to a cloud.
Anakin's belief that he's the only one capable of making the right decisions. Which bring us to Revenge of the Sith, the oh shit moment. We're officially in the thunderous applause stages of Palpatine's entire war to justify seizing power. Then convinces everyone that the Jedi, the literal peacekeepers, are traitors and trying to stage a coup. And guess what? People just believe him. That's like the president waking.
It's in the same way that now James Comey is being investigated because Maureen Comey knows about the Epstein files. So therefore, James Comey has to be getting investigated. I believe that they're using mortgage fraud also to investigate. I believe it's Adam Schiff and his latest political target. I'm trying to remember her name. I know her first name is Lisa, but somebody who's connected to the Fed, who he does not have the ability to fire.
Up one morning and saying, hey everyone, the FBI is now evil and probably we should kill them. That would never happen. You know, instead of asking a single question, Congress just stands up and starts applauding him like a bunch of deranged seals. Revenge of the Sith is the Republic.
It's kind of the opposite of what happened when Mussolini took over, because he had his black shirts stationed right there in the chambers and said, I'm taking over. You're welcome to try to stop me, but you know that I'll just unleash violence on you. And Italian democracy died in complete silence. It was Lisa Cook. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Republic's fall and its completion. The war
Fed
provides
Reserve
Palpatine
Governor
the excuse to declare the Jedi traitors, execute Order 69, and rebrand the Republic into the Empire. The Senate fucking cheers during this transition, showing you how easily a society can be manipulated into accepting tyranny when they don't know what's happening to them. The Jedi are almost entirely wiped out, and the Sith are in control for the first time in 1,000 years. The galaxy is no longer a place of debate and freedom. It's ruled by fear. Palpatine got this power to combat the separatists, but he used the fear, particularly the fear of the Jedi, to justify his continued rule. He manufactured public support for his authoritarian policies, convincing the Senate to willingly surrender democracy. When he declares that the Republic is being reorganized into a galactic empire for a safer and secure society, they erupt into orgasms.
Well, more than likely because there was a bunch of those senators who were on the take. And they know that if they follow along with this plan, that they're going to get theirs. But what they don't realize is that fascism always turns on the people that helped us. Hello, Night of the Long Knives much? Well, not that helped us, help them, rather. It's a bitch being camera shy.
Trump's presidency saw the similar use of propaganda and manufactured crises to consolidate power. His administration frequents pushed disinformation. They attacked the media as an enemy of the people. When he got shot, I knew that was the day he was going to be president. He delegitimizes institutions and portrays himself as the savior of the American way of life. The January 6th insurrection, like Order 66, was an event triggered by years of propaganda, which followers were led to believe that democracy itself had been undermined, just as Palpatine had convinced the galaxy that the Jedi were traitors. Trump fucking attempted a coup and convinced his followers that the 2020 election was stolen and led them to do some meth head activities, dog. Like that footage still makes me laugh. By the time of A New Hope,
but don't forget about, because they failed, they had to do a mass gaslighting campaign. Like, you can't talk to a single one of them who will instantly try to blame Nancy Pelosi about it. When Chris Miller's actual testimony, which you can find in 2 seconds, said, no, that's not the case. We were told not to authorize the guard. Asking him, were you told to make the guards stand down? I said, no, we weren't. That lie's been debunked a million different times. But because they failed, they have to gaslight the public.
Galaxy is fully in the Empire's control. The Senate gets swept away. It's dissolved. Imperial governors and moffs have...
Oh, yeah, gang. Clearly, the president does have the power to deploy the National Guard because, yeah, take a look around. He didn't want to do it on the 6th because he wanted it to succeed. But because it didn't succeed, then came the mass gaslighting campaign. Unless you are willfully ignorant about all of this, it's so blatant and in your face.
Control over their territories, the military, including stormtroopers and Vader, rule all. The Empire rules through terror, epitomized by the name of its not super chill governmental building, the Death Star. That's my Norm Macdonald. Which is, a big old compliance weapon because it can destroy planets. Unlike the Republic, it allowed different.
The destruction of Alderaan is another great example. It just happened in an exchange in 2 seconds. He said, give us the location of the rebel base or we'll destroy your planet. She says, okay, gives them the information. The planet's still destroyed anyway. Don't ever capitulate.
Different species from different planets to allow representation. The Empire is humanocentric, right? They favor humans over aliens, suppressing diversity. In the Republic, yeah, it was corrupt and inefficient, but it still functioned as a democracy. The Empire, there's an emperor ruling with an iron fist. The Jedi were noble warriors, and now they're reduced to a myth. Most citizens don't even believe that they existed, or they believe them to be extinct or irrelevant. A stark contrast in their central role in the prequels. The Sith, on the other hand, though in secret, remain at power in Palpatine's will. The opposition is the Rebel Alliance, led by Leia, Mon Mothma, and Luke Skywalker, to restore democracy. The Empire strikes back to pick the height of the Empire's power. But the rebellion suffers major losses. However, by the time we get to Return of the Jedi, the destruction of the second Death Star and Vader's redemption and Palpatine's end signal the end of the Imperial rule, setting the stage for a new Republic. Once Palpatine has full control, the Republic is scrapped, and it's in favor of the Empire. All dissent is crushed, and anyone who questions authority will get vaporized, which, to be fair, is very efficient, honestly. You can't filibuster if you've been force-choked to death. Trump and Palpatine also thrive off the cult of personality, and it's one of the most striking similarities between the two of them. Both figures present themselves as this ultimate authority, right? Dismissing dissenting voices as illegitimate. Palpatine erodes the Republic from within through through using legal means to subvert democracy, just as Trump attacked democratic norms while still operating through the system, whether through stacking the Supreme Court, restraining congressional oversight by using executive orders to bypass legislation. Trump expanded presidential powers in ways that we feared could lead to an authoritarian government. The transition from the Republic to the prequels to the Empire of the originals reflects Star Wars' central themes about corruption, and the prequels show how easily a society can fall into dictatorship. And in conclusion, this is a warning from a galaxy far, far away. Star Wars, the prequels illustrate how democracies do not fall overnight. They are eroded. Even though Star Wars takes place in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, the galaxy is a lot closer than we think. The prequels illustrate how easily a democracy can fall. Not through external conquest, but through manipulation and populist rhetoric and unchecked ambitions of political figures and the people they surround themselves with. Palpatine's slow takeover of the Republic serves as a mirror on how modern political leaders erode institutions from within, using fear and division as tools for control.
Don't forget about corruption. Like, do you remember Joe Manchin? Do you remember Joe Manchin getting tons of coal money and also being in charge of environmental protection simultaneously, as if that wasn't a fucking conflict of interest? And then when the time came for the John Lewis voting rights bill, didn't vote for that either. Same with Kristen Sinema. She got hers. Remember her?
Meanwhile, Anakin's transformation into Darth Vader is a cautionary tale of the dangers of an unchecked ambition, even from those who start with the best intentions. Trump's rise in political strategy closely resemble Palpatine's, from manufacturing crises to consolidating power through fear. Musk is the embodiment of the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, who was a brilliant individual whose quest for control risks turning into the very thing he opposed. I don't think Anakin is transphobic. Star Wars is more than just science fiction. It's a reflection of history. And if we're not careful, the fall of the Republic probably won't remain as a story in a galaxy far, far away. Democracies don't usually fall with a bang. It's more of a whimper, with people realizing they're handing over freedoms in exchange for security, until they wake up one day and realize they're living under a giant Star Destroyer. We're not immune to this. Right now, we have leaders stoking fear, attacking legitimacy of elections, demanding more power. We have politicians who, if given the choice, would absolutely install a throne room in the Senate chamber just so his VP could fuck the cushions. And half of that Congress would cheer. The rebellion starts with you. It starts with your vigilance. It starts with us not sitting back and letting a creepy old dude slowly take control while we do nothing. Otherwise, before you know it, we're going to be living in an empire, and the only way out will involve a farm boy doing some incest stuff with his sister and a smuggler who human traffics them into a government building. And that, my friends, it's not just a movie, it's a warning from a certain point of view. Again, my opinion, not a be-all, the end-all. Let me know where I got it wrong. Please feel free to leave a comment. Love the...
I just want to know, where is the lie? I mean, it's... The parallels are so blatant that it's not even funny. And it's really, really easy right now to lose hope. But, gang, I gotta go ahead and report this to you, and I'm happy about it. Check it out. The Democrat Caitlin Dray just won an Iowa Senate district that Trump won by double digits last year, flipping the seat blue. Basically, this is the bellwether, because there's nothing that is a better indicator of everything than the actual real election results. So with numbers like that, if we just keep pushing, we're going to be okay, because I mean, with proof like that in fucking Iowa, if we don't win these midterms, they're fucking rigged, plain and simple. And we know that the rigging would just simply be because, well, the House of Representatives would have the ability to stop all of this nonsense and even start some investigations into some shit that needs investigated. Man, it's been so great getting to hang out with everybody, getting to see everybody, because, I mean, I absolutely love Star Wars. And if Star Wars is going to be one of those things that kind of helps to open people's eyes as to everything that's going on, then hey, sometimes art imitates life, right? It's the artists that are going to save us, because we have the ability to use our words, we have the ability to use visual communication, we have the ability to make music, we have the ability to do things that can not only make a difference, but also change people's mind. Because once they see they've been lied to, that's when it's going to be our time. But until then, later, skaters.
.net for podcasts.
Record player that, I could just spin records all the time.
Run into the bathroom and I'm covered in blood. Like I had put my tooth through my bottom lip.
For music. For gaming and pro-liberty game rants. That's skipfransjr.net.